at the highest levels face their own unique set of challenges due to the immense responsibility and complexity of their roles. And these challenges can have wide-reaching consequences for their institutions, organizations, or nations. Welcome to the Leading Woman Show Governance Series, brought to you by our sponsors, the National Endowment for Democracy and Luminate. Today's episode has been curated in partnership with Gaia Africa, a private business and social club for leading women. My name is Abosede Jojagan, and today we shall have a view from the top. The journey to the top for women is often challenging due to existing structural barriers, social and cultural expectations, work-life balance challenges, pay discriminations, sexual harassment, and lack of support. In this episode, we have women who will share first-hand accounts of their leadership journey and view from the top. Joining us on this episode, we have Miss Olaton Candide Johnson. She's the founder of Gaia Women Club, Gaia Africa. It's a professional women's club in Lagos. She's also a lawyer with over 30 years experience in corporate and commercial law. Our next guest is Nnenya Ejibe. She's an accomplished private equity investment professional with about 20 years experience across diverse geographies, including the US and Europe. She sits on the board of directors for Adenia portfolio companies, DDP Outdoor, and QuickMart. Now, I'm sure you cannot wait to hear from our guests. But before we dive into the conversation, we'll take a short break and we'll be right back. Welcome back to the show. Today we have our guests with us and we're talking about the view from the top. Welcome. So, Nnenya, I want to start with you. Can you share your journey with us, right? And how you arrived where you are today? And what are some of the, what have you picked up along the way? What were some of the things that helped you get to where you are today?
I'm very glad to be here today and happy to share a bit about my journey. So I would say in terms of my leadership experience, it actually starts at home. I'm one of four. I'm actually the second born, but I act like the first. So I think I've always been, helping my siblings get organized. Whenever my parents would leave, I would be the one responsible. So I think I had that sort of natural instinct from the get-go. Another thing that really aided in my development was my time in school, primary school, secondary school. I think I was really blessed in that I was free to focus on my studies and my extracurricular activities.
Right.
I was very active in student government. I probably spent more time in my extracurricular activities even than sometimes doing my homework. I think it's such a privilege that you don't, if you're a child and you don't have to worry about making sure the home front is organized and you can really just explore. So I think those experiences as a child, being very active in student politics and all of that, made me aspire to be someone who would make an impact in the world.
Right.
I think then probably something that also was a key factor in my success, especially in a career in finance, was that I've always someone focused in sort of math and science, which meant I was always used to being one of very few women in the room.
Right.
In secondary school, there was a math team. We had like math competitions against other schools. And by the time I was my final year, I was co-captain of the math team with another woman who was my best friend. But basically 95% of the team was male.
Right.
So we were always used to being in the only women in the room. And unfortunately, that was really my experience. I studied engineering. in university, and again, very few women. And then I entered my career in finance, where there were very few women. So, I mean, for better or for worse, I think I'm an elder millennial. My generation, that's sort of the situation. I'm more hopeful for the younger people that they'll, be in a more diverse environments. But I think being a math nerd as a kid, it sort of helped me, be comfortable in those kind of situations. So yeah, I studied engineering, and then I began a career in business, first as a management consultant, and then working in the private equity industry. And maybe for those of you who aren't familiar with the private equity industry, basically we raise capital from institutional investors, think pension funds, think people who have a lot of institutions that have a lot of money that they need to invest to generate a return to meet their obligations. They invest in funds like ours, and then what we do is actually find businesses that are owned by private individuals who might need to sell their business because maybe you're getting older and you need to retire. And if you are an entrepreneur, that's one way that you can retire is by selling your business. So you sell it to a firm like ours, and then we, come in with new management, and basically the objective is to grow the business and eventually the firm to also sell it. So that's the nature of the private equity industry. So I joined a firm in my early 20s as an associate. But I think the thing about being in that industry is you're immediately in the boardroom, even though you're just a junior person, because you're there supporting your partners who have now taken over a business. So yeah, from my mid-20s, I was attending board meetings, not necessarily speaking, but I was there.
In the room.
I was in the room, preparing my bosses for the meetings. And, I've also been very blessed to have some great mentors and great bosses who sometimes would let me talk or ask questions, and be an active participant. And so, yes, I think especially in that line of work, you get exposed to things very, very early. Yeah.
Interesting. Mrs. CJ, let's come to you. I mean, you're a lawyer, 30 years.
More than that.
More than that. What characterized your leadership journey, and what were some of those critical success factors that you can share with us?
Okay, so I really like what Nenia said actually about, because it's not something you really think about in terms of, home, school, all that kind of stuff. But it's true. But I think that, my route to leadership was really quite apart from my training as a lawyer, which does it does teach you certain things. I think it was my ability to take risks, right? Even in my career. So I remember when I was, I started off practicing, and then I moved in-house as a lawyer and administrator. And then I decided at, I think I was about 35, when I had an offer to move into oil and gas from logistics.
Right.
And I thought, first of all, I thought I was too old, frankly. I'm too old to be doing this, But then I thought it's either now or never. And so I moved away from certainty to uncertainty. And that was one. And that, it actually meant taking a pay cut. But I just thought, and I spoke, as usual, with my brother, my husband, and it was just kind of like, in fact, it was my brother who said, well, you never know, because it may look like bronze, but at the end of the day, it might become, something a lot more gold, platinum, whatever. Anyway, I decided that I would take the job, and so I did. And I think also, quite apart from taking that risk, which turned out to be, really good for me, I think also being open to new things, So being open to moving out of your comfort zone, right? Because I remember also when I was offered, while I was in oil and gas, I was offered to, move to another country, move to France. It's not an English-speaking country. And also to be doing something completely different, business development, which meant that I would have to, first of all, learn certain things like, economics, the economics of the business. I would have to learn, finance and, just many different things that were very uncomfortable, to be honest. I used to sweat I was like, what? And then of course I had to like try to learn the language as well, because for day to day you have to, so it was a lot of stuff. And but I think that those steps, because I took those steps, it opened me up to opportunities. It opened me up to seeing different things, and yeah, and so that's what I would.
One of the things I like about what both of you have shared is you have to do hard things. And I think
Yeah.
we don't say that enough, right?
Yeah, you do.
So we talk about the fact that as women, we've arrived, I mean, you never arrive, but you're at this level of leadership. But we never talk about the hard things. You said do math, like do it,
Yeah.
right? And you're saying you had to take risks. You had to make, sometimes uncomfortable and maybe not the best seeming decisions.
Yeah.
And these are really some of the characteristics that get us to the top that we often don't hear about. But I want to talk about some of the challenges that you had on your journey. And I mean, looking back now, I'm sure there are benefits of it, but how did you navigate those challenges? What can you put in our toolkit? Nania, let's start with you.
Okay. Yeah. I think, again, coming from a good foundation, I think strengthens you when you get tossed in a very uncomfortable situation. So again, back to the story about being in the room when I was a young person. We had a board meeting, and I was there with my bosses. And I think this was the same weekend, or was around the same weekend, that the very first Sex and the City movie had come out. And there was another director who saw me, and he's like, "Oh, why are you here? I thought you would rather like be out, watching Sex and the City than coming to this boring meeting." And I was grateful that, I knew what he said was extremely sexist, and I didn't take it personally. I didn't let it sort of get to me. I just thought, oh, wow, this guy's a big idiot. I mean, I just sort of chuckled and then, went around my way. But I'm grateful that I had the wherewithal at the moment. Yeah, you sometimes face these kind of sexist situations. So just knowing your value, knowing that you're there and adding value, and probably I knew more about the business than he did. So yeah, I think that's really important, having a good sense of self.
Right. What would you add to that, Mr. J?
What would I add to that? Well, I think, so first of all, you have to be confident, right? I mean, there are challenges. And I remember, quite a few times being the only woman in the room in a corporate setting. And, like, for example, management meeting, and you say something, and everybody pretends they haven't even heard you. And then a man says it. And everybody said, yeah, that's right. And you're like, excuse me, that's exactly what I said, And so it's being able to say those things and being able to just assert yourself. They may call you aggressive because, the angry woman. But I think you have to be able to assert yourself. And to assert yourself, you have to be confident in the value that you bring and, in who you are, right? And I think just the other things is really just the fact that, you're operating in places and spaces that people don't expect you to be, right? So they almost want you to be getting the coffee, get it yourself, And then I think also it was always clear that men are preferred for positions. They will always find some excuse to say, but, this, that, and the other.
Yeah.
And I think a big challenge that I saw, not necessarily for myself, but a big challenge that I saw was, the fact that having children during the course of your career almost puts a stop to your career. And I think that's really unfair and unnecessary.
Yes. So now you're an entrepreneur.
Yeah.
And I wonder if you have a different view as an entrepreneur and the view you had as a female leader within a corporate setting. Talk to us a little bit about some of the challenges in terms of that you faced or that you face now. And then what skills are you using to navigate these challenges as a leader?
So I think skills, that you need as an entrepreneur, staying power. Staying power, grit. You can't wallow for too long. You have to find ways to manage the imbalances. And I think one of my greatest problems, so in the beginning I was trying to raise money.
Yes.
And the first thing that I noticed was that I used a couple of financial consultants. And even with those two, I didn't get one single investor. And because, it's not a tech business, it's not, it's a business that scales very differently. So I wasn't even looking in terms of PE or VC or anything like that. I knew that it was going to have to be, sort of maybe HNI type investments. So there were, and I found that there were no women in the investment. I didn't come across any. There was simply, and I was like, but that's not possible. So that was the first thing. The second thing was that, you get questions like, you get very odd questions, more or less saying, why are you really doing this? Why don't you just
Do something else.
do something else, and you're getting things like, so for example, I was sharing earlier that when I was trying to find property for the business, I was asked, why is there no man in your company? In short, I shouldn't be here. There should be somebody else negotiating this thing. I also tried to, in trying to get a loan, going back and forth for 3 months, this guy finally tells me, but why can't Oga just give you this money that you want? And I said, well, that's a strange question. If you were looking for money, will they ask will they ask you why Madame can't just give you this money? So you come across things like that, or they tell you that, women aren't asking for loans, or that we have so much money and nobody's coming for the money, you should really apply. And then when you ask how much, they tell you some insignificant amount. And you're like, oh, I see. I shouldn't actually be doing the business I'm doing. I should just be, doing something really small, just to say that, as a woman, you've done something.
Easy.
So men don't really see women in anything that requires, okay, that's a generalization, sorry. But I mean, like, it's you have to, they don't really see you in big business. So when they see you,
because they're not as many though. So it's you are right.
That's true.
Majority of people don't expect women to be there because we've mostly seen men there.
And that's the other challenge, because there are no role models. There's no representation. And the important thing is to be able to see people that look like you doing big things. Because when you do, especially like, with the young people, when they see that people are actually they have one head. So seriously, and they see that you're doing it. And I tell you, I take 2 stories about that. And the first story was Oprah Winfrey, when she spoke about seeing Sidney Poitier get the Oscar award. And she was like, this guy's black. And he's, here. And that for her propelled her. And not too long ago, we saw a young girl looking at Michelle Obama's portrait. And I know for a fact that for her would have been life-changing. It's like, wow, So we need to have a lot more role models. And I look forward to, seeing more and more women. I have to say that, the terrain has changed in the last sort of even 10 years. We're seeing more and more women doing bigger and bolder. And that's great.
We'll go on a short break, but when we come back, I want to talk about governance, especially in the private sector, which is something that I'm sure that you have a lot of experience on. Welcome back to the show. We're still talking about the view from the top. So, Neni, I want to come to you. So, in doing private equity, you have this opportunity to see multiple boards being set up, right? Talk to us a little bit about governance and what you have seen in terms of, I don't know, it might be intentional from your perspective that there are women and men on these boards. And if you can highlight some of the benefits of having women at this level.
I would say the focus on bringing more women on boards of businesses is, at least in the African context, is is accelerating, but it's a rather recent phenomenon. There's actually an initiative called 2X Global that is being driven by big institutional investors and big developmental institutions like the World Bank and similar institutions, trying to bring more, actually trying to do a lot of things, bring more women on boards of businesses, invest more in women owned or women founded businesses, make sure that the employees of companies, there are more women in senior management positions, and also companies are making products and services that are serving female customers. So it's a massive initiative that's trying to basically flow capital to target all of those issues. Definitely at the start of my career, there was there wasn't even a topic.
About that.
You basically, the board were,
Men.
I think, men, people who are in their personal networks, and that would be like their social and educational networks. So typically people similar to themselves. I think now there's more of a focus, but still, it can be a challenge to find, someone with the right set of skills, industry experience, and expertise to bring on board to your company that, is operating in a very specific sector. But there's definitely a lot more interest now.
Absolutely. So, Mrs. CJ, let's go to governance in public leadership, in politics. How do we start to encourage more women to go into leadership? I say that because, you talk about entrepreneurship. It's hard everywhere, sounds like, right? But then when it comes to politics, it's almost like that's the hardest, if there was sort of like a ranking. How do we encourage more women to have a view from the top at that level? And I wonder if you think that there's a relationship between women at that level, women entrepreneurs at the top, and then, of course, women at the top in the private sector.
I think they all have the same problems, right? But I'm very big on legislation. I think that we need to legislate this thing, honestly, because until we do that, I don't think the needle is going to move. And we saw it in the banking, with the CBN, and that is the only reason we have, a decent number of women, at the highest levels in banks.
Yes.
And so I think that that's the first step.
Right.
I think the second step could possibly be women sponsoring women, right? So, you kind of, I think you said it earlier that it's, it's a little more than support, it's now allyship. And I think that when we talk about, allies, we're talking about sponsors.
Yes.
Because sponsors are really, really important in the sense that they see you through, the different roadblocks to get to the top. And, they're using their own network, they're using their own contacts, they're using, opportunities they hear, they push you in there. And I think also it starts in the political parties. You have to have, women at top level. So if there's some sort of policy or legislation that says you have to have a minimum of 30, 40% of women at those levels, that's a start. And then those women can then, be the sponsors of other women. But in the meantime, wherever there are women, I think we need to start sponsoring. Because every time we think about, like sponsoring, and today I was thinking to myself that wouldn't it be interesting if we had a proper structural, formalized sort of sponsorship, platform, system, something, right? Because I think that there are challenges with society and with culture, because if a man is your sponsor,
then it's interpreted
it's a completely
in many
different
ways.
Interpretation. Yeah. I mean, and so, and then, if the woman does finally get to a place, it's a story about how something must have happened.
Must have done something.
So, I think that if it's more formalized, if it's more, structured, then maybe we begin to get used to that. And I think that's another way that we can do that. But I think that we all share the same problems. The same problems, it's very lonely, in those spaces.
Yes.
You are ignored because you're there. And so what else do you want? Let's focus on the younger people who need to get there.
Right.
But when you get there, you have a new set of problems, which is that, you need to be able to bounce ideas off people.
Right.
And they don't really look like you and they don't really understand you. Women think differently to men. So that's what, that would be my view.
Yeah, thank you very much. I mean, you highlighted a few things there around legislation, sponsorship, very, very critical. Nene, we're wrapping up this conversation, and I want people to not just go away with the view from the top being challenging, particularly for women, but I want them to also understand what the potential solutions could be for us to really get more women into those leadership positions so that it's not as lonely,
Yeah.
right, at the top, and so that you can see role models
Yeah.
and their pathways, right? So for a young woman, for example, today in Nigeria who aspires to be president, there's no pathway because she's never seen it. No one has ever done it.
Yeah.
So what do you think are some of the support structures? What do we need to do to ensure that we're seeing more women actually go into leadership across all levels?
Again, I have hope for the younger generation. I give this anecdote. I was on a call. It was a potential transaction our firm was looking to acquire, and there were many parties involved, lawyers, accountants, etc. Maybe it was maybe 20 people on Teams. And then at the end of the call, one of my junior analysts called me, and he's like, "Nenya, that's so crazy. You were the only woman in that meeting." And it didn't even cross my mind. I didn't even notice. But he said, "Oh, that's just so unacceptable." That's what he told me. So I feel like the Gen Z is on a different path altogether. And I'm very, I think that men have a role to play. They need to be aware. They need to notice. They need to point things out. So, yeah, I thought that was a really interesting situation.
So we need men as allies.
Yes.
That's something we keep saying. Women cannot sort of carry this burden alone to change it.
Yeah. No, I fully agree.
What would you add to that? What are some of the support structures that we need to actually push more women into these leadership positions?
Bias training. I think we all need bias training because we all have, unconscious and conscious biases, right? We do like to see people that look like us. And I think that, I'm sure that you know the UN survey that says 98% of the world are biased against women.
Of course.
Or is biased against women. And yeah, that means women are biased against women. And particularly in, patriarchal systems, the assumption is just that, the man takes the lead and But the truth is that until we start to understand our own biases, until we start to be more conscious that we have these biases and we shouldn't have these biases.
What I was just thinking about is a young woman is going to watch this, right? And she's going to say, wow, heard your story, they see where you are, probably go and Google you, whatever, go to your LinkedIn. Nenia, what would be your final thoughts for a young woman who's saying, I want to get to the top, right? As you said, the Gen Zs maybe are ready to go. And then the generation after that, whatever they're called. Gen
Alpha.
Alpha, yes. I definitely have one of those in my house. So what would you say to those young women based on your journey and the privilege now that you have having this view?
I mean, ultimately, it's about actually following your passion, following your interest. And then I loved your point earlier about taking calculated risks when an interesting opportunity comes. Because I think that confidence that you need and that grit you will need will come if you're operating or working in an area of deep interest and passion for you. So I think it's really in your young years exploring different topics and knowing what really motivates you and then just continuing to pursue that path.
Fantastic. Mrs. CJ, what would be your final
what I would say is that to the young people, be confident because they are living in a completely different world to the world that I grew up in, right? And I have great hope because things have changed radically. Even the way young people are going to be educated is very different. When I was growing up, you either had to be a doctor, lawyer, engineer, or whatever, right? Those were the professions. We weren't even told to think about going into public service, into the civil service, even though my parents were both civil servants, actually. So, my father was a lawyer, but anyway, in some photo. But now, everything is just completely disrupted.
Absolutely.
And I don't think that there's anything that any one of them, any one of you would like to do that you cannot do.
Like that.
Because even to the point where we have like amazing creatives, right? Who the world, everyone in the world knows all
That's
are
what they
different.
do.
This is what
The
they do.
chef,
They know their names.
Pop artists.
Yes, totally.
Things
So
that we could not have fathomed.
we could not have even broached that with parents, right? Otherwise, they'd have told you that you're going to end up in the market and you're going to stay there or something, right, to scare you. So I think that, you know, the path is open, and I think that we are all beginning to think in very, very different ways, right? So men have girls, they want their girls to progress, right? Women have their daughters, and they're teaching them what to do and how to...
role modeling for them. as well.
Absolutely. Yeah. And now they have the best, you know, advantage because they're seeing more and more role models.
Yes.
More and more women are doing like just phenomenal things.
Yeah.
And there are many, many men that are encouraging, you know, girls, boys, just go do it, get it done. You know, so I think that the world is a very different place, and I have hope, really.
Fantastic. So we are going away with hope that more women will get to see the view
for sure.
from the top. We'll take a short break, and when we get back, we'll go into our gaming segment, Misrepresented. Now it's time for Misrepresented, our gaming segment. Today we will test our audience's knowledge on female leaders who have been active in society. Representing Team A and Team B are Emanuela and Pelumi. Now, Emanuela, please tell us the name and position of the person you see on the screen.
Deputy Governor of River State.
Great, give her a round of applause. Now, Pelumi, please tell me the name and position of the next person you see on the screen. No?
Her name is...
Yes.
Her name is Ireti.
Her name is what?
Ireti.
What's her position?
Senate President.
All right, so let me help out. Her name is Ireti Kingiwe, and she's a senator representing the FCT. Give both of them a round of applause. Now, on this note, I would like to thank our distinguished guests for joining us today in the studio. Thank you to Ms. Olaton Candidate Johnson and Nnenya Ejibe. We appreciate you for being a part of today's episode. And of course, to our live audience, you have been simply amazing. To our viewers watching today's episode, we say thank you. And of course, because this is the last episode of the season, to everyone who has made the Leading Woman Show Season 2 Governance Series a success, we say a huge thank you. To our dearest sponsors, the National Endowment for Democracy and Luminate, we extend our heartfelt gratitude for your unwavering support to shape the perception that people have of women as leaders. A special shout out to the incredible web team, especially our outstanding producers, and of course, our creative director and team at Parallax Consulting. You're truly amazing. And finally, I would like to thank the dynamic team at Will & Global. Thank you for your dedication to bringing the Leading Woman Show Season 2 to life and for supporting the vision to inspire a shift to gender-balanced leadership. Follow us across all social media platforms at Will & Global. Please like, share, and leave us a comment. Once again, remember that women's leadership can change everything, everywhere. See you next season.